They had no idea betraying you would ruin their life. They thought they could betray you and walk away untouched. They had no idea that turning their back on you would set fire to everything they once held dear. See, some people play with loyalty like it's a game, thinking they can cross you and still keep the benefits of your presence. But what they didn't understand was this: you weren't just another person in their life. You were the blessing, the covering, the silent force that kept things together. And the moment they betrayed you, they opened the door to consequences they couldn't control. What they thought was just a choice became the very reason their life began to unravel. Because when someone betrays someone chosen, favored, and protected, they're not just walking away from a person, they're walking away from the grace that kept them. And now, they're learning the hard way. Betrayal isn't just a wound, it's a mirror. They never realized that the moment they betrayed you, they weren't hurting you, they were revealing themselves. See, betrayal doesn't begin with a blade in the back, it starts with a shift in the spirit, a coldness in their eyes, a silence when you needed their voice, a laugh behind your back when you needed their loyalty. That's not just hurt, that's exposure. When someone betrays you, they think they're dealing damage to your heart. They think they've broken something in you that you'll never recover from. But in reality, all they've done is shine a light on the weakness in their soul. Betrayal is a mirror, and when they turned it on you, they thought you'd be the one caught in shame. But no, what they saw staring back at them was their own reflection, drenched in fear, insecurity, envy, and guilt. People think betrayal is about power, like they've gained the upper hand. But what they don't see is that true strength doesn't come from hurting others. It comes from staying solid when others try to tear you down. When they lied on your name, when they whispered behind your back, when they sold out your trust for their convenience, they were banking on your breakdown. They didn't realize they were handing you the evidence, the proof, the receipts of their own downfall. You didn't even have to fight back. Life has a way of letting betrayal do all the talking. While you were crying in silence, God was writing the story. While they were bragging about how they played you, heaven was setting the stage for their exposure. Because betrayal isn't just a sin against another person, it's a boomerang. What you throw out with deception, you get back with destruction. You see, when people betray someone like you, someone who was loyal, who showed up, who kept secrets, who prayed for them, who defended them when they weren't even in the room, they're not just crossing a line. They're cutting off their own lifeline. They think they're pushing you down, but they're actually pulling themselves into a storm. Because what they fail to understand is you weren't just in their life for decoration. You were there as a covering, a blessing, a divine connection. You were the one that kept peace in chaos, the one who carried their burdens when no one else even noticed they were struggling. You were the one who saw their pain and chose to stay when others walked out. And when they betrayed that, when they threw that kind of presence away like it was nothing, they thought it would bring them freedom, but instead, it brought them ruin. Now they walk around haunted by the very decision they thought would elevate them. They thought losing you was a win, but life doesn't play by those rules. Now they're dealing with the silence they created, the loneliness they asked for, the instability that came the moment your presence exited their life. And the worst part? They can't even blame you, because deep down, they know you never switched up. You never moved dirty. You never gave less than your all. It was their own reflection in that mirror of betrayal that sentenced them. They betrayed you, thinking you'd fall, but all that fell was the mask they wore to hide their true intentions. And here's what makes it even more powerful. You didn't have to lift a single hand. You didn't have to clap back, expose them, or sink to their level. You let your silence speak, and that silence became the loudest consequence they've ever heard. Because when someone looks in the mirror and realizes they betrayed the one person who had their back without conditions, it hits different. It doesn't just bruise the ego, it crushes the spirit. They now live in a reality where your name reminds them of everything they lost. Not because you shouted it, but because your growth, your peace, your progress is doing all the shouting for you. So don't carry the wound like it's your shame, carry it like your proof. The fact that you survived it without losing your integrity is a testimony all by itself. You didn't let it make you bitter, you let it make you wiser. You didn't let it break your faith, you let it refine it. They thought betrayal was your ending, but really, it was your rebirth. It was the moment the mirror turned and showed you who they really were. And in that moment, you were set free. You were released from connections that couldn't hold your future, from relationships that were never rooted in truth, from environments that couldn't handle your purpose. They thought they ruined you, but now they see they only ruined their access to you. And as they sit in the wreckage of their own deception, they're finally facing the truth they tried to run from. That betraying you didn't just cost them a relationship, it cost them favor, it cost them protection, it cost them peace. And that price is far heavier than they ever imagined. God doesn't let his children stay broken. They broke you, yes, but they never understood that breaking you wouldn't keep you broken. They thought that betrayal would bury you, that the weight of their deception would keep you down, silenced, forgotten. But what they didn't count on was the God who was standing over your life, watching every tear, every sleepless night, every moment you stayed silent when you could have retaliated. They had no idea that the same God who allowed the betrayal would also be the one who raised you from the rubble. Because God never lets his children stay broken. Not when their heart was pure, not when their hands were clean, not when their love was real. You see, while they were plotting, God was planning. While they were celebrating your fall, God was preparing your rise. And what they thought was your ending was really your transformation. There's something divine about being broken and still breathing. Something powerful about being shattered by people you trusted and yet refusing to let the bitterness take root. You felt the sting. You felt the loss. You even questioned your worth for a moment. But what they didn't know is that your healing wasn't in their hands. Your comeback wasn't in their control. Your restoration was already scheduled by heaven. So while they walked away thinking they left you in pieces, God was picking those pieces up one by one and rebuilding you in silence. And when God rebuilds you, he doesn't use the same fragile foundation. He fortifies your spirit, renews your mind, and elevates your vision. What broke you before can't touch you now. They don't even recognize the version of you that God restored. They see you smiling again, rising again, glowing again, and it disturbs their spirit because they swore you'd be nothing without them. They thought their betrayal would define you, but what they failed to understand is that it was actually the betrayal that refined you. It was the fire that burned away your self-doubt, your need for validation, your willingness to shrink yourself just to be accepted. God used the pain they caused to build your backbone, sharpen your discernment, and teach you how to love yourself the way you were loving everyone else. You came out of that storm with more strength, more wisdom, and more clarity than you've ever had before. And now they're the ones struggling with the aftermath. See, when you're favored by God, your healing becomes their confusion. They don't understand how you're still standing. They don't understand how you didn't break down completely. They don't understand how peace still lives in your home, how purpose still moves in your steps, how joy still dances in your soul. But the truth is, you made it through, because God doesn't let his chosen ones stay down for long. He may allow the fall, but he never leaves you there. He may allow the betrayal, but only to remove the people who were secretly draining your destiny. And now you see it clearly. You see that what you thought was a loss was really a divine redirection. Don't ever doubt the strength that comes from surviving betrayal with your faith intact. You didn't just get up, you grew. You didn't just move on, you matured. And while they're still stuck in cycles of confusion and emptiness, you're stepping into a life that's covered in grace. You're not just healed, you're elevated. And that elevation didn't come because you fought back. It came because you let God handle what was too heavy for you to carry. You let him deal with the betrayal while you stayed obedient, stayed focused, stayed humble. And that humility, that quiet surrender, that's what God rewarded. He saw you choose peace over revenge. He saw you pray instead of curse. He saw you walk away instead of clinging to people who no longer deserved access to your life. Now they sit in rooms where your name is mentioned and it burns them. Not because you wronged them, but because they wronged the very person who only wanted to see them win. They betrayed the one who held them down, who saw the best in them, who covered their flaws and loved them anyway. And that kind of betrayal, that kind of loss, it comes back to haunt them in ways you'll never see. Because while you're walking in healing, they're walking in guilt. While you're covered in peace, they're covered in confusion. While you're building with God, they're crumbling under the weight of their own decisions. So keep walking, keep healing, keep shining. Don't look back for closure. Your growth is the closure. Your peace is the revenge. Your glow is the answer to every lie they told. And let this be your truth. God doesn't let his children stay broken. He lifts, he restores, and he makes sure the same people who tried to destroy you get a front row seat to your elevation. They had no idea what they were setting in motion when they betrayed you. But now the story is writing itself, and you're still the one standing, favored, healed, and unstoppable. You were the blessing they mishandled. They mishandled you, thinking you were replaceable. They treated your loyalty like a convenience and your love like a transaction. They thought they could come and go from your life, take and take without ever pouring back into you, and that somehow you'd always be there, waiting, hoping, forgiving, staying. What they failed to realize is that you weren't just another person in their story, you were the blessing. You were the one thing holding back the chaos in their life. You were the calm in their storm, the voice of reason in their confusion, the safe place in a world that constantly disappointed them. And the moment they betrayed you, they didn't just lose a relationship, they lost divine protection. They lost favor. They lost the presence of someone who truly saw them and still chose to stand beside them. They mishandled the very thing that was elevating their life, and now they're living in the ruins of that mistake. People get so comfortable with good people, thinking kindness is weakness and forgiveness is foolishness. They don't understand that when someone genuinely loves you, supports you, believes in you, that's not ordinary, that's sacred. But they took your sacred presence and played with it like it was disposable. They leaned on you when they were broken, but disappeared when you were the one bleeding. They used your words when they needed strength, but disrespected your silence when you were at your lowest. They laughed with you in public, but doubted you in private. And through all that, you still gave, you still poured, you still showed up. Because your heart was never built on conditions. It was built on character. But there comes a time when the giver walks away, and when the giver walks, something shifts. Because the blessing isn't just what you did, it was who you were. Now they're discovering that you weren't just a chapter, they were living in a whole season of grace because of your presence. You were the reason certain storms didn't destroy them. You were the reason they had clarity when they were confused, hope when they were hopeless. You stood in the gap for them when no one else even knew there was a